Hello, everybody. Welcome back. As you know, we've been talking about South America and more specifically these early civilizations. And as I told you all yesterday, we mentioned the Maya is the first group that we're going to be talking about. So we're going to talk about the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca. Now, as noted yesterday, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go a little bit more into detail about one of the cultural things related to the Maya, and that happens to be their calendar system. Okay, they have a very unique calendar system they're kind of well known for. So, what we're going to do, I'm going to kind of shift ahead here, and you're going to see we're going to talk about a few things that go with their calendar, kind of how the math works. We're going to talk about the uses for the calendar, which are kind of down here in red. Also, there is just a clip here of this video. We don't even need the volume to go with it. I just like to show you guys the action of how this thing works. And then the last part here that we're going to do is this comparison chart. Now, this comparison chart and what we're actually going to put as the answers is what you're going to be writing along with me in your notebook. We're going to do it together. And that's what you're going to submit as your activity. Now, again, what's written in the boxes here currently is not all of the answer part, right? All of these dot, dot, dot right here, all these ellipses, they're going to be things that we talk about together here that you're going to add to the mix. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning here. Let's just go back to this one. Let's talk about this calendar in general. I know this is a very kind of complex system and there's a lot going on here. So I'm going to explain to you all as best as I can in numbers and in words and visually with this video link right here. Okay, the big thing about the Mayan calendar is it consists of three rings. You can see it over here. There's one ring here, a second ring here, but there's another ring along the outside, which is really big that you can't even see. And it's in this video too. They give you a 3D model of what this thing would actually look like if you were to build it to scale. But let's start over here with this side real quick. And let's talk about what's going on with these rings and all these different colors I have going on. Okay. The first thing is, again, they have three rings. One of them, the blue one here, represents the days in the week. The red arrow and the red line here, they're going to discuss the days in the month. And this bigger ring that we said you can't really even see is 365 days. It represents the solar year. Just like in our solar year, how 365 days is the approximate amount of time for the Earth to rotate around the sun. Okay, so obviously this number looks pretty familiar to us. So let's talk about how this works. And we're going to talk about how there are some similar things and different things from our calendar, obviously. First thing is that they have a 13-day week. So as you can see on this ring, there are 13 numbers on it to represent one week. Whereas in our week, obviously, it's represented as 7 days. Another thing that's different is they have 20-day months. So what I'm saying is every month was 20 days. So there was no difference in months, except for kind of a tricky one here at the end, which we're going to talk about. Okay, so they had a 20-day month, or 20 days per month. So you've got 13 days in a week, you've got 20 days per month. They actually had 18 months, which we're going to talk about here in a second. And again, they have a 365-day solar year. Now, what you're going to see in this video, and what I'm going to explain to you all here real quick, is their calendar worked in a system that is very interesting. Because if you imagine these wheels turning one click per day, so let's imagine you click this thing and you went 5 and then 2 and then 9. That number pattern, or as you can see more accurately in this picture of it, there's some numbers, there's also some different pictures to represent the months or the seasons. So that number pattern, or I guess that pattern of images, does not repeat again. Like you wouldn't see the numbers 4, 1, and 8 match up like this for another 52 years. So that's why at the bottom of this box it says 52-year sequence, because this particular grouping of images is not going to come back around for 52 years, which is pretty interesting. Okay, so real quick here, what we'll do is I'll show you all what they do with this 3D model. Okay, and we're only going to watch about a minute of it because that's all it really takes. And this is an excerpt from another longer documentary, but you can already see here if I pause it, they're trying to build this 3D model. And again, did Mayans actually build a big giant wheel like this? Not really. This is kind of an artist conception or a 3D model conception. What would usually happen in reality is they would keep track of it on a wood block or maybe large pieces of paper, or they would kind of draw them in. So actually building a big giant wheel of metal or wood like this would probably not work. But this big ring is the 365 days. So that would be this big one over here. And then the 13-day week is in the middle here, real small. And the 20-day month is this other wheel right here. And if you notice, if I keep this playing, they're going to show you how if this thing was constantly moving 1 click per day, that's how these would match up. So see, they're highlighting the outer ring right now to show you the 365, and then the 20-day month, and then the 13-day week. And they're going to give you some examples here of what the sequence is going to match up as. So they use some of the Mayan terms. So like 3 Manik 14 pole would be 1 click, and then 4 Lamot 15 pope, and then 5 Maluk 16 pope, and the thing goes on, so on and so forth. So what they're getting at again is you would not see this particular sequence show up again in the window there for another 52 years. So that's a pretty unique type of calendar. And then just zoom out one more time to kind of show you what it would look like if this thing was actually built to scale. Okay, so I'll leave the model right there. So that's pretty interesting to see how it would have actually worked if you built it to scale, but it was more of a numbers game than really anything. Okay, down at the bottom here, these are the uses or reasons for the calendar. Okay, and we're going to throw some of these explanations here in a second. But one of the uses of the calendar was to keep track of seasons. And it wasn't just to keep track of seasons just for the heck of it, it was really with farming purposes in mind. So obviously, they wanted to know when the dry seasons were going to be, when the cold seasons were going to be. So they really had to keep accurate count of when the next farming season or when the next winter was going to come around. Another use you all can see here is religious events. They kept track or had different symbols to represent different religious events. So if they were going to have a celebration of that event, or if it represented a holiday, or if it was, kind of the celebration day of a specific god, those things would all work themselves into the calendar, into the different parts. And the last one is anything related to celestial events. Okay, celestial events has a lot to do with astronomy. So their calendar actually had some connection to the star patterns, to the patterns of the moon, to the movement of things like constellations throughout the year during the different seasons, the height of the sun in the sky during different parts of the seasons. And they could even accurately keep track of things like solar eclipses. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead here, the next slide. Now, everything you see over here is where we definitely want to get the notebook out, because not only are we going to write the starting part, you all working with me right now are going to finish these sentences. And you're going to have the written complete sentences with your notes before you submit them to me. And like always, you all can type this up if you want and share it, or you can just write in your notebook and send me a quick picture of it. Not a big deal. But if all you have when you submit it is what's here right now, y'all are clearly not going to get credit because we need to finish the sentences first. Okay, so we're going to make calendar comparisons to our current use of calendar right over here. So I have a 2020 calendar right now on the side. So what we're going to do for each of these boxes is we're going to write the first part. Okay, so if you wanted to go ahead and pause me at any time, you can to write all 7 of them down. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep trucking here and we're going to talk about these comparisons specifically. Okay, so number 1, as an example, compare the number of days per week. Now we'll see if you all remember this or if you have to go back in the video. But how many days per week did the Mayans have? Okay, they had 13, whereas we have 7. So for your answer here, it says compare the numbers of days per week. You can put the Mayans had more days per week, or you can say, the Mayans had 13 days and we have 7 days, but something that shows that you actually answered this comparison. All right, number 2, compare the number of days per month. See if you remember, how many days do they have in every month? They had 20. Okay. Now, this comparison's a little different because if you guys know, do we have a specific set number of days per month? We do not. And you guys can look over here. Some months have 31, some months have 30, and February has a shifting 28 days, and then every 4 years, 29 days. So when you're comparing the days per month, you can say any number of things, right? The Mayans had 20 days. We have 28, 29, 30, and 31, depending on the month. So anything like that would be a perfectly fine answer. Number 3, compare the number of months per year. Okay, now I said this one quick, but how many months did the Mayans have? They had 18, technically. We're going to talk in number 4 here how they had extra little pieces of bits here, but comparing the number of months, we clearly have 12 months, and they had 18, which leads us to number 4. Okay, compare the extra days problem. Well, what do I mean by extra days? Well, I don't know if you all have been following along with this math, but for the Mayans, right, if they had 20-day weeks times their 18 months, you come up to 360 days. So you're short by 5 days. So what they would do is they would have almost an extra month. It was kind of seen as like a special month of only 5 days long. And they just work those 5 extra days into the end of the year. Now, what we do with the extra days is obviously right here, we include an extra day every 4 years. Now, why do we do that? Well, scientifically, it's basically like this. Okay, everybody lands on the number 365 as far as how long a year takes. But actually, it's 365 and 1/4 days to get all the way around the sun. So what we do is to make up for that fourth of a day, every 4 years, we just add the one extra day. Okay, so as far as your answer goes right here, again, it says compare the extra days problem. You can say the Mayans added 5 extra days, and you could say we just add 1 day every 4 years. So either way, you're dealing with the extra days problem. All right, number 5. Compare the uses of each calendar. Well, I'm going to go back here for a second and we're going to look at the uses. Okay, these were the uses for the Mayan calendar: the seasons for farming, religious events, and celestial events. Okay, now let's think about their calendar and our calendar. Do we keep track of the seasons on our calendar? Not so much. And especially for farming. Do we keep track of anything on our calendar specific for farming purposes? Not really. Okay, so that one is kind of different. Religious events. Do we keep track of religious events on our calendars? In a lot of cases, yes, we do. Okay, religious holidays or different religious events. And depending on your religion and your calendar, it might differ. But there are a lot of different people who keep track of religious events on calendars. So that one's kind of similar. Celestial events is kind of a half and half. Now, do we keep track of the stars and the constellations and the movement of the sun? We don't. But what do we keep track of on most calendars if you actually look at one? The phases of the moon, believe it or not. Yes, we do. So if you look at a modern day calendar, a lot of times it will also have listed the phases of the moon or what days there's a full moon for that month. So that one's kind of half and half. It's kind of similar, kind of different. So when comparing the uses of each calendar, you obviously can list a few of the similarities and a few of the differences. For number 6, compare the making of each calendar. Well, that one's pretty easy because we've already said once that to make an actual Mayan calendar to scale was really not useful. Okay, I don't want to say it was impossible because clearly it would be possible, but it depends on how big you were planning on making this thing, right? And it's not something you can necessarily just hang on a wall if it had to be really big, especially because it's got 3 rings with one of them being super big. On the other hand, our calendar, obviously, any piece of paper, any digital device, your phone, your computer, whatever, you can find a calendar pretty easy. Okay. So, in order to make one or necessarily kind of use it for what you're using it for, it's pretty different. So, when comparing the making of each calendar, obviously, Mayan calendars couldn't easily be made. In fact, a lot of people didn't make them. And in our case, clearly you can print one out. You can just have one on your phone or your computer. So that's pretty easy as far as making it for number 6. All right, number 7, the last one here, comparing the repetition of each calendar. Now, what do I mean by repetition? Well, if we go back to the Mayan calendar, I told you all that every time this sequence clicks, just like in the video, every time this window right here has a specific pattern in it, that pattern will not repeat for 52 years, but it will repeat, right? So every 52 years, that calendar would be exactly the same. So you would have, let's just call it 4, 1, and 8 as an example. You would have 4, 1, and 8 again 52 years later. Okay, now on the other hand, our calendar, does it really repeat? Well, our calendar is actually pretty linear, right? It just keeps going on and on and on. Now, do you repeat months? Yes. Do you repeat days? Yes. Do you repeat years? Well, kind of. Obviously, when we talk about the last 2 digits, obviously you have 1820 and 1920 and 2020. So as far as writing the date on a piece of paper, where we're like 4/17/20, you would see that again in 100 years. But as far as the entire year, like let's say May 6th of 2020, is May 6th of 2020 ever going to repeat? No. Again, because our calendar is always ongoing. It doesn't repeat. Even the Mayan calendar took a long time. It took 52 years. Our calendar does not repeat, technically speaking. So for this comparison down here, compare the repetition. Again, you can say the Mayan calendar would repeat every 52 years, but our calendar actually just continues to go on forever, essentially. It's just kind of like a mathematical line just continuing off into however long it is. Okay, so that's going to wrap up this conversation. Like I said, we were going to spend some time here talking in great detail about their calendar. And as you could tell, it's a pretty detailed situation. So it's pretty inventive for them to have come up with all these parts of this calendar. All right, again, as far as your assignment, what I want to see is all of this with obviously answers that we've come up with here together included, right? Not just what you see in the box currently right now. That's not going to cut it as far as points go. All right. So hopefully all you're doing well, you're staying safe. Everybody be healthy out there. And as always, I'll talk to you very soon. All right. Bye-bye.